The human delegation stepped off the starship onto the bustling platform of the neutral space station. It floated between two star systems, a meeting point for dozens of alien civilizations. Humans had visited many worlds before, but nothing prepared them for the sight that awaited them here. Aliens of every shape and color moved about, trading goods, exchanging information, and conducting business. But there was one group that drew immediate attention: the Vrillians. The Vrillians were tall, elegant, and carried an air of superiority. Their smooth, shimmering skin reflected the lights of the station, and their eyes held a cold calculation that unnerved even the most seasoned diplomats. Humans had heard stories about them. The Vrillians were wealthy, powerful, and obsessed with legacy. They had an unusual practice that no human had ever encountered before. At a nearby reception hall, the delegation observed the Vrillians in action. The aliens spoke with other species, offering gold, technology, and rare minerals. The humans quickly realized what was happening. The Vrillians were paying men from other species to bear their children. It was a strange, transactional way to preserve a bloodline. Humans whispered among themselves, shocked and confused. How can they do this? One of the younger human diplomats asked. His eyes narrowed in disbelief. Isn't it cruel? Different cultures have different morals, the senior diplomat replied, though even he felt a chill at the sight. But this goes beyond what we know. They are literally buying life. The Vrillians noticed the humans watching. One of them, a tall female with silver eyes, approached with an elegant stride. She spoke in perfect galactic common, her voice calm but commanding. I see your kind is observing our ways. Do you not wish to participate? The humans exchanged uneasy glances. The offer was clear: join the system, accept payment, and continue the Vrillian legacy. But no one stepped forward. One of the human men, a scientist named Jaren, politely declined. No, thank you. That is not how we choose to live. The Vrillian's eyes narrowed slightly, but she did not press. Curious, she said. Most species do not refuse. Your kind is unusual. Jaren felt the weight of her gaze, but stood firm. We value choice. Every individual decides for themselves. The Vrillian turned away, murmuring something in her own language. The humans watched her leave, feeling a mixture of relief and anxiety. They knew the Vrillians were testing them. Their refusal might be seen as weakness or rebellion. As they moved through the station, the humans observed more of the Vrillians' influence. Every alien they spoke to seemed either intimidated by or impressed with the Vrillians. There was power in wealth, yes, but also in fear, and humans, with their unbending morality, were challenging that power simply by refusing to take part. Later, in a quiet corner of the station, the human delegation gathered to discuss what they had seen. This isn't just a custom, one diplomat said. It's a system built on control. They manipulate others, offering rewards in exchange for something deeply personal. It's wrong. But we are outsiders, another replied. We cannot simply force them to stop. We have to find a way to respond that shows who we are without starting a war. Jaren, still thinking about the silver-eyed Vrillian, spoke up. Perhaps we don't need to fight them in their way. Maybe our response should show a different kind of strength, one that they cannot buy or manipulate. The others looked at him curiously. What do you mean? The senior diplomat asked. I mean, Jaren said slowly, we can show that legacy, honor, and respect are not commodities. We can demonstrate that true strength comes from choice, courage, and integrity, not from gold or threats. The delegation fell silent, considering his words. It was a simple idea, but profound. Humans had faced countless dangers across the galaxy, survived impossible situations, and had always relied on ingenuity, teamwork, and moral conviction. Perhaps this was another test, not of physical power, but of principles. As night fell on the station, the lights of distant stars shining through the observation windows, the humans prepared themselves for what was to come. They did not know how the Vrillians would respond to their refusal, but they understood one thing: their choices mattered. And even here, far from Earth, humanity's values could ripple through the galaxy in ways no one expected. Jaren looked out at the busy platform, filled with aliens going about their lives. Somewhere among them were those who accepted the Vrillian system without question, and somewhere, perhaps, there were those who would watch humans and wonder why they were different. The delegation gathered for their first formal meeting with the Vrillians the next morning. They were nervous, yes, but united. The humans had made a choice. And that choice would define not only their mission here but the way the galaxy might come to see them. Humans did not bend to fear, did not trade their principles for gold, and did not allow themselves to be controlled. And in the cold, calculating eyes of the Vrillians, something unfamiliar flickered: curiosity. Humanity had arrived, and the galaxy would never see them the same way again. The day began quietly on the space station, but the tension was thick in the human delegation's quarters. The Vrillians had watched them carefully, and now it seemed the aliens were planning their next move. The humans knew that refusing an offer so deeply ingrained in another culture could bring scrutiny, or worse, subtle pressure. Jaren paced the room, thinking. "They don't understand our way of life," he said. "To them, everything has a price. To us, some things are priceless." A younger diplomat, Lena, frowned. "Do you really think they'll stop testing us?" They seemed amused, but I think there's more to it. They might try to manipulate us using people we care about. The senior diplomat, Rourke, shook his head slowly. "That is the Vrillian way. They do not act out of malice. They act out of certainty that everyone has a cost. And when someone does not, they are intrigued. Or threatened." Jaren stopped pacing and turned toward them. "Then we have an advantage. They expect everyone to follow the rules they set. We don't. We can show them another way, not by fighting, but by acting differently, by being humans." Their conversation was interrupted when a communication alert flashed. It was a Vrillian envoy requesting a private meeting. The humans exchanged cautious looks. No one wanted to appear weak, but diplomacy required attendance. The meeting took place in a glass-walled chamber overlooking the star-filled void. The Vrillian envoy, the same silver-eyed female who had approached them before, greeted them with a polite nod. "I hope you have considered our offer," she said, her voice calm but firm. Jaren stepped forward. "We have considered it. We are honored that you thought of us, but we cannot participate. It is not our way. We value choice and respect. These are not commodities to trade." The Vrillian tilted her head slightly, a gesture of mild curiosity. "Interesting. Most species would accept immediately. You resist for reasons I do not understand. Your kind is different." She paused, studying the humans. "You say you value choice. Yet by refusing, you still make a choice. Do you not see the contradiction?" Rourke spoke carefully. "We make our own rules. Our choice is not for sale. That is not a contradiction, it is our principle." The Vrillian's lips curved slightly, almost like a smile. "Principles. A quaint notion. And you think your principles make you strong?" Jaren felt a surge of confidence. Strength is not measured by what you control or what you can buy. True strength is in character, in standing firm when everything around you is tempting you to bend. The Vrillian's eyes glinted, but she said nothing more. Instead, she turned toward the window, gazing out at the stars. For a long moment, the humans felt the weight of her attention, as if she were trying to understand something beyond their words. When she finally spoke again, her voice was softer. "Perhaps your kind can teach me something." The delegation left the meeting quietly. Outside, the station hummed with life, and humans moved among the alien crowds as if nothing had happened. But inside, they all felt the first hint of change. The Vrillians were curious now, and curiosity was unpredictable. Over the next few days, humans began small acts that unsettled the Vrillians further. They helped alien traders whose shipments had been delayed, shared medical knowledge freely with other species, and offered protection to those who could not defend themselves. None of it was done for reward. None of it was transactional. The Vrillians observed silently at first. Then some began to whisper among themselves. "Why do they help without payment?" One asked. "They gain nothing." "They gain something greater," another replied. "They gain respect and loyalty. They are strange." Humans noticed the whispers too, and it emboldened them. They realized that by acting with kindness, bravery, and respect, they were demonstrating something the Vrillians could not buy or control. Their behavior was alien to the Vrillians' mindset, and that made humans unpredictable and powerful in a way the aliens did not understand. One evening, Jaren sat on a balcony overlooking a sector of the station, thinking. Lena joined him quietly. "Do you think they'll ever understand?" she asked. Jaren shook his head. "Maybe not fully, but they will see that our way works. They will see that strength does not come from wealth or control. It comes from choice, courage, and integrity, and that is something no one can purchase," Lena smiled. "I like the sound of that. It feels human. The station lights shimmered off the metal surfaces around them. Somewhere deep in the crowd, a Vrillian watched silently, as if contemplating a lesson too complex to grasp in a single moment. The humans had taken the first step, not with weapons or threats, but with something far more powerful: their values. The galaxy had long been ruled by wealth, fear, and control. But humans were here, and in their simple, steadfast way they were already beginning to change the rules. The Vrillians would not forget them, and the ripple of their choices was only beginning. Jaren stood looking at the stars. "This is just the start," he said quietly. "They wanted us to bend. We didn't, and now, the galaxy will notice. Humans were not just observers anymore. They were a force of a different kind, one that others could not predict, control, or buy, and that made them dangerous in ways the Vrillians had never imagined." The humans moved carefully through the station's crowded corridors, but they carried themselves with a quiet confidence. They knew the Vrillians were watching, but now the humans also knew they had a new advantage. Their behavior, helpful, honest, and fearless, was beginning to confuse the aliens. Humans did not act for gold, power, or recognition. They acted because it was the right thing to do. A sudden alarm echoed through the station. A cargo transport had malfunctioned, its containers of volatile gas threatening to explode. Panic spread as aliens scrambled to evacuate the area. The Vrillians watched from a distance, expecting the humans to hesitate or flee, but the humans did not. Jaren and a few others ran toward the danger, calculating quickly what needed to be done. Lena followed, coordinating with station engineers. The Vrillians' guards frowned, unused to seeing anyone act without waiting for instruction or reward. The humans moved with precision, securing the containers, calming panicked bystanders, and sealing the dangerous cargo. Jaren reached out to lift a container that had slipped from its position. His hands were steady, his focus complete. A silver-eyed Vrillian female watched him closely. She had sent her guards to stand nearby, perhaps to see if humans would fail. But humans did not fail. Within minutes, the crisis was over. Not one life was lost, and the cargo was safely secured. The Vrillian's eyes widened slightly, though she quickly regained her composed expression. "Curious," she murmured. "They act without reward, without fear of loss. They risk themselves for others." Rourke, standing near Jaren, nodded. "It is how humans operate. We value life, not possessions. We take responsibility even when there is no benefit to us. That is our strength." The Vrillian turned away, speaking quietly to herself. The humans could not understand her words, but they could feel the weight of her contemplation. The lesson was clear. Humans could not be measured by the same standards as other species. Later, the delegation held a small meeting in a quiet lounge. They reflected on the events and realized something important. The Vrillians expected fear, compliance, or greed. Humans had none of these. Instead, they had choice, courage, and moral strength. Lena spoke thoughtfully. "Do you think this will change how they see us?" Jaren smiled faintly. "It already has. They may not understand fully, but they are watching. And when they do not understand, they start to question. That is how change begins." Over the next few days, humans continued their quiet campaign. They offered help to struggling alien traders, repaired malfunctioning ships without payment, and shared medical knowledge freely. Everywhere they went, whispers followed. Humans acted without expectation, and in doing so earned respect not through fear or wealth, but through integrity. The Vrillians were growing unsettled. One day, a small delegation approached Jaren and Rourke. "Why do you act this way?" one Vrillian asked, her voice tinged with curiosity and skepticism. "You gain nothing, yet you risk yourselves. Surely there must be a reason." Jaren looked her in the eye. "Because it is right. We do not measure life or honor by money. We measure it by choices, courage, and what we do for others. That is how humans operate. That is our way." The Vrillian considered his words carefully, as if weighing a complex puzzle she could not yet solve. Finally, she nodded slowly. "Your kind is different, unpredictable. Perhaps there is wisdom in your ways." Rourke added, "It is not about wisdom alone. It is about principles. Humans stand by them even when it is hard, even when others expect us to bend." The Vrillians could not deny it. Humans were unpredictable, not in anger or recklessness, but in their steadfast commitment to doing what they believed was right. That unpredictability was a kind of power the aliens did not understand and could not control. That evening, as the station lights reflected off the polished floors, the humans gathered quietly. They knew the Vrillians were planning, observing, and perhaps even plotting. But the humans were ready. Their strength was not in weapons or wealth, but in their unity, courage, and principles. Jaren looked out at the stars, thinking of Earth far away. Humanity had always faced dangers and challenges, and somehow, they had survived every test. Now far from their home planet, the galaxy was presenting a new challenge, an alien culture that measured everything by control and currency. But humans did not bend. They did not fear. They did not compromise their values. And in doing so, they were already beginning to shift the perception of an entire species. The Vrillians had assumed they would bend or fail, as countless others had. But humans were not like other species. Humans acted with courage, with integrity, and with heart, and that made them more powerful than the Vrillians could ever imagine. Somewhere in the shadows of the station, the silver-eyed Vrillian observed them, still uncertain, still questioning, still fascinated. Humans were no longer just another species to be measured, they were something else entirely. And the galaxy had yet to see the full extent of their influence. Humans had made their choice. They had stood firm, and the ripple of that choice was only beginning to reach out across the stars. The humans had grown accustomed to the Vrillians' presence, but the aliens had not grown accustomed to the humans. Every day, whispers about their actions spread through the station. Traders and visitors began speaking of humans not as simple outsiders, but as a species that acted without fear, without greed, and without expectation. It was during a routine meeting in the central plaza that the ripple of influence became clear. A young alien trader who had been struggling with a shipment of delicate crystals found himself cornered by debt collectors. Humans, observing from a distance, quickly intervened. Jaren, Lena, and a few others stepped forward without hesitation. They offered assistance, moving the crystal safely and negotiating with the collectors. The Vrillians watched, silent and tense. They had expected humans to act cautiously or self-interestedly. They had not expected humans to risk their own safety and reputation for strangers. It was a new kind of power, and it made the Vrillians uneasy. Later, in a quiet observation chamber, the silver-eyed Vrillian spoke with one of her advisors. These humans, they do not act as we predicted. They are unpredictable. They act without reward, without fear, and yet they succeed, her advisor frowned. Perhaps they are lucky. Or perhaps they are reckless. Luck cannot explain this, she said softly. This is something else. Something human. Meanwhile, the humans moved among the station with purpose. They helped a group of alien engineers repair a damaged shuttle, guided lost travelers to safety, and even shared medical treatments for minor illnesses. Everywhere they went, their actions spoke louder than words. One evening, the Vrillians gathered in a private chamber. They were frustrated, unable to understand how humans could act with such courage and integrity. One of them finally spoke, irritation in their voice. They are undermining our influence without even trying. How can a species so small in number have such impact? The silver-eyed Vrillian remained silent for a moment, then said, It is because they do not follow our rules. They are not afraid of consequences in the way we expect. They stand firm in their choices and they inspire others without seeking reward. That is power we do not control. Back in the plaza, humans continued their work. They coordinated a safety drill for several alien crews, showing them how to respond to emergencies. Unlike the Vrillians, humans did not demand payment or recognition. The aliens participating in the drill began to whisper among themselves, comparing the humans to the Vrillians. For the first time, some questioned the old ways. Jaren noticed the effect. Every act we do quietly sends a message, he said to Lena. It is not enough to refuse their system. We must show an alternative. We must live it, Lena nodded, and the galaxy will see it, even if the Vrillians cannot accept it yet. The Vrillians tried subtle methods to regain influence. They offered lavish rewards to those who had begun to admire humans. They whispered threats to those who followed human examples, but humans did not respond to their tactics. They continued helping others, intervening when necessary, and speaking plainly about choice and responsibility. One notable event drew attention from beyond the station. A young Vrillian had been trapped in a malfunctioning elevator, panic spreading as it shook violently. Without hesitation, a human technician named Torin climbed into the elevator shaft and secured the cables, rescuing the Vrillian before the lift could collapse. The act was witnessed by dozens, including Vrillian leaders. The silver-eyed Vrillian watched from a distance, eyes narrowed but thoughtful. "They are not like us," she said quietly. "They do not measure strength by dominance. They measure it by courage and by action." Rumors began to circulate among other alien civilizations visiting the station. "Humans," one trader whispered to another. "They risk themselves for others without reward. They are honorable," another replied. "It is strange but inspiring. Perhaps there is another way to live." By the end of the week, the Vrillians realized that their control over perception was slipping. The humans' simple acts of bravery and kindness had drawn attention, admiration, and even quiet respect. They had changed the conversation, and the Vrillians had not anticipated it. Jaren and the delegation gathered in their quarters. "We are making a difference," Lena said, her voice low but confident. "They will never admit it, but they are noticing us," Rourke smiled faintly. "It is only the beginning. What we are doing here is more than survival or diplomacy. It is showing the galaxy that a species can act with honor, courage, and choice, and that alone is powerful." Outside, the stars shone bright against the darkness of space. The humans felt the weight of possibility pressing on them. They knew challenges lay ahead. The Vrillians were clever, wealthy, and influential, and they would not accept being overshadowed lightly. But humanity had discovered its own power. It was not gold or fleets that made them strong. It was their steadfastness, their courage, and their unyielding commitment to principles. And as they looked across the bustling station, watching aliens begin to notice, they understood that the ripples of their actions were beginning to spread far beyond this one place. For the first time, humans realized something extraordinary. They were not just observers in the galaxy. They were changing it, slowly, quietly, and with purpose. And the Vrillians would never be able to predict the next move. The humans had become more than observers on the station. Their presence was a quiet force, reshaping how other species thought about strength, honor, and choice. News of their actions had begun to spread beyond the station, carried by merchants, travelers, and diplomats. Whispers of humans who acted without fear or greed were reaching distant systems, challenging long-held assumptions. One day, an alien delegation arrived seeking guidance. They were from a small, struggling system that had been under Vrillian influence for generations. They had heard stories of humans helping others without payment or expectation, and wanted to understand their ways. Jaren and Lena welcomed them. "Our actions are simple," Jaren explained. "We do what is right without expecting reward. We value choice and responsibility. That is how humans live, and it works for us." The visiting aliens exchanged looks of surprise. They had been taught that survival meant obeying the strongest and taking advantage of the weak. Humanity's approach was unfamiliar yet compelling. Meanwhile, the Vrillians were growing increasingly tense. They sent advisors and observers to monitor human activity. Attempts to bribe or intimidate humans had failed. Offers of wealth were politely refused. Subtle threats were met with calm firmness. Everywhere humans went, they inspired admiration and respect. And the Vrillians could not stop it. One Vrillian leader, frustrated by the growing admiration humans were receiving, called a meeting with her peers. "They are changing the way others see us," she said sharply. "A species so small, so inexperienced, and yet they influence countless others without even trying." "How is this possible?" Her advisor spoke cautiously. "It is their way of life. They act with courage, integrity, and choice. We cannot control them. We cannot predict them." The silver-eyed Vrillian remained silent for a moment, considering the words. "Perhaps there is power in what we do not understand," she murmured. Back on the station, humans were unaware of the full extent of their influence. They continued helping others, guiding lost travelers, repairing malfunctioning ships, and teaching emergency procedures. Aliens who had once been loyal to the Vrillians began to seek out humans for guidance. Some quietly adopted human methods, assisting others without thought of reward. During a diplomatic dinner, a group of alien leaders approached Jaren and Rourke. "We have seen your actions," one said. "We wish to learn from you. How do you maintain such discipline and courage without fear of loss?" Rourke smiled. "It is simple. We value life, choice, and responsibility. We do not measure strength by wealth or power. We measure it by courage, integrity, and how we treat others. The leaders exchanged looks, impressed and thoughtful. "Perhaps your way is stronger than we realized," another said quietly. The Vrillians, hearing of these conversations, grew more uneasy. Their influence over other species was slipping. Aliens who had once followed Vrillian customs without question were now questioning them. The humans were not seeking control, yet they had achieved influence beyond any material measure. One evening, Lena and Jaren watched the station from a balcony. "Do you think the Vrillians will ever admit that we are making a difference?" Lena asked. Jaren shook his head with a faint smile. "They will not admit it openly, but they feel it. They know their system is no longer unchallenged. Others are seeing an alternative, and that threatens them more than any weapon could." Lena nodded. "It is strange to think that we are changing an entire galaxy without firing a single shot." Jaren's eyes reflected the distant stars. "It is not strange. It is human. We do not rely on fear, money, or manipulation. We rely on choice, courage, and integrity, and that is stronger than anything the Vrillians can offer." As the days passed, more alien species began to approach humans for advice, guidance, and partnership. They sought to learn the human way, acting with honor, helping others freely, and valuing choice above all. Even some former Vrillian allies began to question their own practices. The Vrillians grew desperate. Attempts to undermine humans failed repeatedly. The humans remained calm, steady, and principled. Their actions had become a quiet revolution, a new standard for how civilizations could interact without coercion or payment. Humans understood that the galaxy was changing around them. Their presence had introduced a new idea. That influence did not require dominance, wealth, or fear. True power came from courage, integrity, and the willingness to act rightly, even when others expected otherwise. By the end of the week, the humans gathered quietly in their quarters. "We have made an impact," Jaren said softly. "Not through force or conquest, but through our choices. The galaxy is starting to notice." Lena looked out the window at the glowing lights of the station. "And the Vrillians cannot stop it no matter how hard they try. We are not part of their system, and that makes all the difference." Jaren nodded. "Yes, they may have wealth, fleets, and influence, but they cannot buy courage or integrity. And that is why humans are unstoppable in a way they cannot understand." For the first time, the delegation felt the magnitude of their actions. They had not come to the station to dominate or conquer. They had come to represent humanity, and in doing so, they were quietly reshaping the galaxy, one act of courage and integrity at a time. Humans had become more than observers. They had become an example, and the galaxy was beginning to follow. The humans sensed the tension long before the Vrillians acted. News of their influence had spread too far, and some among the Vrillians could not accept a species so small in number commanding respect across the galaxy. Quiet whispers of planning had reached human ears through neutral contacts. Something was coming. One morning, the station trembled with alarms. A fleet of Vrillian ships appeared near the outer docking rings, their presence imposing. The humans knew this was a test, but it was unlike any they had faced. It was not a disaster to fix or a crisis to prevent. It was a challenge to their reputation, their influence, and the very ideals they had championed. The Vrillian commander's message was clear. Human actions were unacceptable and disruptive to the natural order of power and control. They demanded compliance, obedience, and acknowledgement of Vrillian superiority. Jaren and Rourke exchanged glances. "They are trying to scare us," Jaren said quietly. "But fear is not part of our system. Our strength is in choice, courage, and integrity," Lena added. "And in the alliances we have built. We are not alone." The human delegation called a meeting with representatives from several other species who had witnessed their actions over the past weeks. Traders, engineers, and diplomats gathered, each offering their loyalty, guidance, and in some cases ships. Humans did not ask for this support. They had earned it through integrity and courage. Now it was time to unify. Rourke stood before the group. "The Vrillians believe fear and wealth define power. We know better. Our strength comes from principles, alliances, and the courage to stand for what is right. Together we can face them, not with anger, but with unity." Across the station, the Vrillians positioned their fleet menacingly. Some of their ships hovered close to civilian zones, a show of intimidation. Their communications officers transmitted warnings to every ship and station: comply or face consequences. But the humans remained calm, and their allies followed their lead. Jaren addressed the crowd of allies, his voice firm and "To steady. We will not be forced to compromise our values. We act for others, not ourselves. If the Vrillians want to see our response, they will see it, not through weapons, but through courage, strategy, and unity. We will demonstrate strength they cannot understand. The Vrillians were growing frustrated. Their ships were unmatched in technology, and yet humans had turned a situation that should have been fearful into a demonstration of moral power. Alien allies who had once feared the Vrillians now stood openly with humans, refusing intimidation. A sudden crisis arose when one of the Vrillian ships attempted to block a civilian convoy. Instead of firing weapons, human pilots and allied crews executed a coordinated maneuver, guiding the convoy safely through without confrontation. The Vrillians were astonished. Humans had neutralized a threat through planning, courage, and precise action, not violence. Meanwhile, Jaren and Lena worked on communication channels, broadcasting a message to the station and nearby fleets. "We act not out of fear," agreed, Jaren said. "We act out of choice, responsibility, and integrity. We protect others because it is right, not because we are forced. And in unity we are stronger than any fleet, stronger than any wealth, and stronger than any threat." The message resonated. Aliens across the station and nearby systems began to align with the humans' principles. Even some Vrillians hesitated, uncertain how to proceed against a force they could neither intimidate nor predict. The silver-eyed Vrillian observed quietly from her command ship. She had expected resistance through fear, manipulation, or wealth. Instead, she saw collaboration, courage, and moral leadership. The humans had turned what should have been a simple display of dominance into a showcase of unity and integrity. As night fell over the station, the standoff reached a tense calm. The humans had no weapons deployed, no threats issued. Their victory was in their organization, their principles, and the allies they had inspired. The Vrillians realized they had misjudged a species that measured strength not in power, but in character. Jaren looked at Lena. "They cannot understand us," he said. "And that is exactly why we are effective. They calculate in terms of control and wealth. We calculate in terms of courage, choice, and integrity. They cannot predict our moves because they are not built that way." Lena nodded, smiling faintly. "We showed them what strength really means, and the galaxy saw it too. They are not just Vrillians versus humans anymore. Everyone is watching." By dawn, the Vrillians had retreated slightly, their fleet repositioned, but their authority weakened. Across the station, whispers of admiration and respect for humans spread like wildfire. What the Vrillians had hoped would be a demonstration of dominance became proof of human ingenuity, courage, and moral leadership. Humans had faced the ultimate test without firing a single shot. They had united allies, protected the innocent, and remained steadfast in their principles. The Vrillians had assumed strength came from fear and wealth, but humans had shown that true power came from choice, courage, and integrity, and that kind of power could not be purchased, threatened, or ignored. Jaren stood at the observation deck, watching the stars beyond. "The galaxy is beginning to understand," he said softly. "We don't need to fight with weapons. Our strength is something else, something they cannot touch, and it is only the beginning." The humans had faced the ultimate challenge and emerged not just victorious, but as a symbol. Their actions had rewritten the rules of influence, and the galaxy would never be the same. The humans had survived the Vrillians' challenge, and their reputation had spread throughout the galaxy. Their actions, brave, principled, and selfless, had inspired countless species to rethink what true strength meant. Yet Jaren and the delegation knew their work was not finished. Influence alone was not enough. They needed to solidify the ideals they had demonstrated so clearly. On the neutral station, a council of alien leaders convened, invited by humans to discuss a new approach to interstellar relations. Traders, engineers, diplomats, and representatives from systems previously under Vrillian influence gathered together. The atmosphere was tense but hopeful. For the first time, many of them would speak openly without fear of coercion or reprisal. Jaren addressed the council. "We have seen a galaxy shaped by fear, wealth, and dominance. That has been the rule for centuries. But we believe there is another way. Strength is not measured by power or gold. It is measured by courage, integrity, and respect for others. We have acted according to these principles, and the results speak for themselves." The council listened closely. Some leaders nodded in agreement, while others remained skeptical. still steeped in traditions of control and hierarchy. But no one could deny the impact of humanity's example. Aliens who had once feared the Vrillians now spoke freely of collaboration, choice, and mutual respect. Lena stepped forward. We do not claim to be perfect. We make mistakes just like any species. But our actions are guided by a simple truth. We protect and support others not because we must, but because it is right. That is the legacy we offer, and it is open to all who choose it. Across the station, word of the council spread. Former Vrillian allies began reconsidering their customs. Merchants discussed principles over profit. Engineers shared knowledge without expectation. Even some Vrillians hesitated, unsure whether to continue old practices or to observe the humans and learn from them. Jaren watched as representatives from several species approached him. Your kind has shown us something remarkable, one said. We were told that influence comes from domination. Now we see it can come from courage, choice, and honor. We want to follow that example. The silver-eyed Vrillian arrived quietly, standing slightly apart from the others. She had observed humans for weeks, noting every act of bravery, kindness, and wisdom. Her expression was thoughtful, almost hesitant. Your species is different, she said finally. You teach without demanding. You lead without controlling. Perhaps there is wisdom in your ways. Rourke stepped forward. It is not wisdom alone. It is action combined with principles. Humans act because they believe it is right. And through that, we inspire others. Not through fear, not through coercion, not through gold, but through example. The Vrillian regarded him carefully. You have changed many minds, and perhaps even ours. That is a power we did not understand. Outside, the station lights reflected off the polished walkways, shining across dozens of species working together. Humans and aliens collaborated, repaired ships, and exchanged knowledge freely. The station itself became a symbol of unity, a microcosm of a new vision for the galaxy. Jaren stood on the observation deck with Lena. We've done more than survive, he said. We've shown that a species can shape the galaxy not through fear or dominance, but through integrity and courage. That is our legacy, Lena smiled, and it is only the beginning. Others will carry it forward. Our actions have started something bigger than ourselves. The silver-eyed Vrillian approached them quietly. Perhaps your species was sent here for a reason, she said softly. You do not seek conquest, yet you have conquered hearts and minds. You do not command obedience, yet you have inspired loyalty. It is extraordinary, Jaren nodded. We came to observe, to learn, and to represent humanity. But in doing so, we have also reminded the galaxy that strength comes in many forms. Not all are measured by power, and not all are bought or sold. As the council concluded, delegates from multiple species pledged to adopt human-inspired principles. They would foster cooperation, respect, and choice over domination and exploitation. The humans had done what the Vrillians could not. They had changed the conversation and rewritten the rules without violence, without coercion, and without expecting reward. In the quiet moments that followed, the humans gathered one last time before leaving the station. Jaren looked at the stars, reflecting on Earth far away. Humanity had arrived in the galaxy not as conquerors, but as pioneers of a new kind of power, one built on courage, integrity, and choice. The galaxy had taken notice. The Vrillians would never again underestimate humanity, and countless civilizations now had a new example to follow. Humans had left their mark not in fear or wealth, but in hearts and minds, and that was a legacy far more enduring than any material treasure. Lena turned to Jaren. The galaxy will remember this, won't it? Jaren smiled, eyes fixed on the endless expanse of stars. Yes, they will remember, and they will carry it forward. Humanity's choice, humanity's courage, humanity's integrity. These are gifts that cannot be taken, bought, or destroyed. That is our legacy. And as their starship prepared to leave the station, the humans felt a quiet satisfaction. They had faced a powerful alien culture, stood firm in their principles, and changed the galaxy without firing a single shot. Their legacy would ripple through the stars for generations to come, a testament to the power of courage, choice, and honor. The galaxy had changed, and humanity had shown the way.